My name is Blair Caldwell. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how my own parents decided to give everything, literally everything, to my younger brother. That evening, in our living room in Bentonville, Arkansas, my father stood up, looked around the family, and announced with the biggest smile, "We will hand over all our assets to your younger brother." The room went quiet. My mom was beaming. My brother was already grinning like he'd won the lottery. I just sat there, looked straight at him, and said calmly, "Congratulations, Tanner." Then I pulled out the main factory key, a thick stack of contract copies, and one sealed envelope, and placed them right in the middle of the coffee table. Tanner tore the envelope open first. 30 seconds later, his face turned white as paper. He jumped up and screamed, "This has to be a joke." My parents froze. That was the exact moment everything they planned fell apart, and they had no idea it was coming. If you want to know how I made my own family regret that decision for the rest of their lives, stay until the end. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this one gets crazy. Let's start from the beginning. Growing up, the sound of filling machines and the smell of fresh plastic bottles were basically my lullaby. Carson Springs, our family's bottled water plant in Bentonville, Arkansas, was the only world I knew. My father, Dale Caldwell, built it from nothing back in the 90s, and my mother, Rhonda Caldwell, handled the office side. Then there was my younger brother, Tanner Caldwell, who's 30 now, 4 years behind me. From the moment Tanner could walk, he was treated like royalty. Private kindergarten, elite middle school, summer camps in Switzerland, brand new Jeep Wrangler. The day he turned 16, all paid in full before I ever saw a single paycheck. Meanwhile, the summer I turned 15, Dad sat me down after dinner and said I was old enough to start pulling my weight. The next morning, I was on the production floor in steel-toe boots, 2 sizes too big, learning how to spot cracked molds and fix jammed labelers. I worked every weekend and every school break. While my friends were at the lake or the mall, I was counting pallets in the warehouse until midnight, then doing the books until 2. Mom would bring me cold pizza around 10 and tell me I was doing great, that this was how you earned respect in the family business. Tanner. He'd roll in around noon the next day, grab the keys to his Jeep, and disappear until the streetlights came on. By 17, I was running the night shift alone. Dad trusted me with inventory because I never made mistakes, and the crews listened to me because I knew every machine better than the guys who'd worked there 20 years. I opened my first savings account with those overtime checks, dreaming of college tuition. 6 months later, Mom asked to borrow the balance to help cover Tanner's flight to a soccer tournament in Barcelona. I never saw that money again. When I asked about it, Dad just shrugged and said being the older sister came with responsibilities. Tanner got sent to an expensive boarding school in Colorado for high school. I stayed home and took community college classes online so I could keep the plant running when Dad's back started acting up. Every report card Tanner brought home, no matter how average, earned him a new gaming console or a shopping spree in Dallas. My straight A's on my transcript got a pat on the back and an extra shift on Saturday. The real kicker came the Christmas I was 19. I'd saved almost $12,000 working double shifts for a whole year, planning to buy a reliable used car so I wouldn't have to borrow Dad's truck anymore. 2 days before the holidays, Mom sat me down with tears in her eyes and explained that Tanner had been accepted early decision to a university in London, but the deposit was due immediately. They needed every penny I had. I handed over the bank book without a fight. Tanner flew out in January wearing the Canada Goose jacket I'd secretly wanted for 2 Arkansas winters. I told myself it was temporary, that once the business grew, I'd get paid back. That family came first. So I kept showing up at 5 in the morning, kept fixing broken conveyor belts with duct tape and prayers, kept learning everything I could about water chemistry and distribution contracts, because nobody else seemed interested. Dad spent more time on the golf course, Mom focused on charity luncheons, and Tanner posted photos in front of Big Ben with captions about living his best life, all of it funded by the overtime hours I was putting in back home. Looking back, I see it clear as day now. I wasn't just the reliable daughter. I was the unpaid employee they never had to put on the books. And they were perfectly fine with that arrangement until the day everything changed. In 2014, everything almost ended. Dad had just turned 60 when he collapsed on the warehouse floor, clutching his chest. The ambulance ride felt endless, and the hospital confirmed a mild heart attack. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in Mom's eyes. Doctors said he couldn't handle stress anymore, and the company was bleeding money fast. Suppliers were threatening to cut us off, and Walmart had already put our small regional contract on hold. That same week, my parents called me into Dad's hospital room. He looked smaller under the white blanket, but his voice was steady when he slid the durable general power of attorney across the tray table and told me to sign it. From that day forward, I had full legal authority to run every aspect of Carson Springs. I was 24 and suddenly the only person keeping the lights on. I threw myself into fixing what was broken. Nights became research marathons learning water chemistry and reverse osmosis systems while the factory hummed in the background. I found an old filtration unit at an auction in Oklahoma, drove through the night to get it, and spent the next month rebuilding it piece by piece with two mechanics who believed in me. The result was water so clean, the lab in Fayetteville said it beat every national brand on the shelf. With that new formula in hand, I started cold calling buyers. I flew to Bentonville wearing the only blazer I owned, met with Walmart's beverage team, and refused to leave until they agreed to a 30-day trial run. 30 days turned into a full regional contract, then a national exclusive that no one thought a little Arkansas plant could land. Revenue went from red to 8 figures in under 3 years. Meanwhile, Tanner graduated from his London University and came home with a photography degree and zero intention of touching a production line. He moved into the guest house, bought himself a $60,000 camera rig with company money, and spent his days driving around the Ozarks taking artsy shots of sunsets and abandoned barns and whatever else looked good on Instagram. Every time he posted, my parents would share it with captions like, "Our future CEO hard at work." Dad's health improved enough for golf 3 times a week, and Mom threw herself into planning Tanner's welcome home party at the country club. They kept telling visitors the business was in great hands because Tanner was learning the ropes. I was the one signing million-dollar purchase orders at 2 in the morning, but somehow, he was the one getting the credit. I didn't complain out loud. I told myself the contracts were safe as long as I held the power of attorney, and the company was finally profitable again. I hired more staff, upgraded every machine, and built a quality control lab most big brands would envy. Employees started calling me boss without irony, and the bank finally stopped sending warning letters. For a few years, it almost felt like my parents noticed. Then Tanner decided he wanted to rebrand the company. He came to redesign the labels in neon colors and turn Carson Springs into a lifestyle brand aimed at 20-year-olds. Dad thought it was genius. Mom booked photo shoots in Miami. I sat through the meetings explaining that Walmart buyers don't care about neon bottles, they care about margins and reliability, but nobody wanted to hear it. They kept saying Tanner had the vision and I was just the operations girl. By that point, I had stopped expecting thank yous. I was too busy negotiating freight rates and making sure every truck left the dock on time. The company I had pulled back from the grave was now worth tens of millions, and every penny of growth had my parents credited to family teamwork. Translation: Tanner posted a nice picture, so he deserved the corner office whenever he felt like showing up. I kept my head down and kept building because that's what I'd always done. I never imagined they were already planning the day they would take it all away from me and hand it to him on a silver platter. Early 2024 was when the mask finally slipped. It started with little things I couldn't ignore anymore. Dad's office door stayed closed for hours during meetings I wasn't invited to. The shared company calendar suddenly had blocks labeled family business only that I wasn't allowed to open. One Thursday, I walked past Mom's desk and saw a printed email with the subject line Succession Timeline, Confidential. My name wasn't anywhere on it. Then came the photo. Tanner posted it on his private Instagram story, him standing on the loading dock in a tailored navy suit, arms spread wide in front of the Carson Springs sign. The caption read, "Future Owner Loading," with a crown emoji. Within minutes, Mom had screenshotted it and sent it to her country club group chat with heart eye emojis. I stared at my phone in the break room and felt something inside me crack. That same week, Dad called me into his office after lunch. He didn't even look up from his computer when he said the words that still ring in my ears. "Blair, you're incredible at operations. Nobody runs this place like you do. But Tanner's the face the brand needs going forward. People want him to take the reins soon." I asked what that meant for me. He finally met my eyes and shrugged. "You'll always have a job here, of course. Maybe VP of production or something. Tanner just has the vision investors like." I walked out numb. That night, I drove around Bentonville for hours until I ended up parked outside the house of the only person I'd been dating seriously for the last 2 years, my boyfriend, Dawson Holt. We'd kept things quiet because I didn't want office gossip, but that evening, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I sat on his couch and told him everything, every detail from the age of 15 until that afternoon. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, then pulled me close and said the first sensible thing anyone had said to me in years. "You built this company from the ground up after your dad's heart attack. Those Walmart contracts have your signature, not Tanner's. You need to talk to someone who actually understands business law before they pull the rug out from under you." He was right. I spent the next few days pretending everything was normal while my mind raced. I went through old files and found the original power of attorney from 2014 still active and unrestricted. I printed every contract I had personally negotiated, every lab report on the new formula, every email chain with Walmart buyers. The stack was 3 inches thick, and every page proved the current value of Carson Springs existed, only because of work I had done in the last decade. Still, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Tanner sitting in my chair signing my contracts while my parents clapped, like it was the natural order of things. Dawson saw me falling apart and finally put his foot down. He looked up old contacts, found a name I hadn't thought about in years, and told me I had to make the call before it was too late. I knew exactly who he meant. The only person who had ever seen through my parents' favoritism from the very beginning. The only person who might actually be able to help. One rainy afternoon in late April, I drove to the outskirts of Rogers. Dad's old college friend Ernest Walsh, a retired business attorney who still kept his license active, lived in a quiet cedar house by Beaver Lake. I hadn't seen him in years, but he opened the door before I could knock, took one look at my face, and waved me inside without a word. The living room smelled like pipe tobacco and old books. I spread every document across his oak dining table, the 2014 power of attorney, every Walmart contract, the lab certifications for the new formula supplier agreements, everything. He sat down, put on reading glasses, and started flipping pages in complete silence. 30 minutes passed. Then another 30. I just watched rain streak the windows and waited. Finally, he leaned back, removed his glasses, and let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned, Blair. Your father handed you the keys to the kingdom and never took them back. Every single asset of real value created after 2014, the filtration patents pending the exclusive distribution deals, the customer lists, even the trademark applications you filed last year, all of it was executed under your authority alone. Legally, these aren't family assets anymore. They're yours to move wherever you want." I asked if he was sure. He laughed not kindly. "I've been doing this since before you were born. Your parents own the dirt and the old building and some rusty equipment. You own the Golden Goose. And with an unrestricted durable power of attorney still in force, you can put that goose in a brand new coop tomorrow morning without asking permission from a soul." He stood up, walked to his office, and came back with a fresh legal pad. For the next 3 hours, we worked straight through dinner. He explained exactly which entities needed creating, how to structure Pure Summit Holdings as an Arkansas LLC, with me as sole member and manager, and how to transfer every intangible asset cleanly and irrevocably. When I asked about pushback, he just smiled. They can scream all they want. They'll have to prove fraud or undue influence, and every signature after 2014 is either yours or bears their own names on documents they never read. Good luck with that in court. By midnight, the operating agreement was drafted, the EIN was applied for online, and the transfer documents were ready for electronic filing first thing Monday. Mr. Walsh refused payment, said, "Watching Dale Caldwell finally face consequences was worth more than any fee." He poured us both a small bourbon, raised his glass, and said the 4 words I had waited my whole life to hear. "You earn this, kid." I drove home through the clearing storm feeling something I hadn't felt in decades: control. The next morning, I opened a new bank account under Pure Summit Holdings, filed the LLC with the Arkansas Secretary of State, and started preparing the paperwork my parents would sign without ever realizing what they were giving away. Everything was in motion and there was no turning back. The last 2 weeks of May 2024 became the quietest performance of my life. Every evening I came home from the plant with another thick folder tucked under my arm. I timed it perfectly, right after Dad finished his golf game and Mom was starting dinner. I'd walk into the kitchen, kiss Mom on the cheek, and slide the stack across the island with the same casual tone I'd used for years. More contract renewals and accounting cleanup. If you could both sign wherever there's a yellow tab, it'll save us a fortune on taxes next quarter. They never questioned it. Dad was usually halfway through a beer and scrolling golf scores. Mom was stirring something on the stove and already thinking about book club. The first night, Dad flipped to the last page, scribbled his name, and asked if it would lower his bracket. Mom signed right below him without reading a single line and told me I was such a good girl for handling the boring stuff. Night after night, I brought new folders. One contained the assignment of the master distribution agreement with Walmart. Another transferred the proprietary filtration blueprints. A third moved the entire customer database and the new mineral blend formula into Pure Summit Holdings. Each document looked exactly like the routine paperwork they had been signing for a decade. Same font, same letterhead, same yellow tabs marking signature lines. I kept my face completely neutral. When Mom asked why there were so many pages, I told her the IRS had new reporting rules, and our accountant insisted on full documentation. Dad joked that as long as it kept money in his pocket, he would sign anything I put in front of him. Tanner was barely around, too busy picking out office furniture for the day he would take over, so he never saw the folders at all. By the end of the second week, every intangible asset of value had been legally and permanently reassigned. The Walmart exclusive, the Sam's Club expansion scheduled for fall, the pending patent applications, the supplier lock-in contracts, the trademark portfolio, everything that actually made money now belonged to Pure Summit Holdings, an entity that existed only in my name. I filed the final transfers electronically on a Friday morning from my office, hit confirm, and watched the Arkansas Secretary of State stamp every document recorded. Then I printed fresh copies, slipped them into a new manila envelope, and locked my office door for the weekend. That Sunday evening, I cooked dinner for my parents like nothing had changed. Mom complimented the roast. Dad talked about his handicap dropping 2 strokes, and Mom asked if Tanner's new suit had arrived from Dallas yet. I smiled through all of it, nodding at the right moments while the clock on the wall ticked closer to the family meeting they had scheduled for the following Saturday. When Mom reached for the dessert plates, she noticed the corner of one last folder sticking out of my bag on the counter. She raised an eyebrow and asked if there was anything else they needed to sign. I told her no, everything important was already taken care of. They laughed, completely clueless, and went back to planning Tanner's big announcement party. I cleared the table, loaded the dishwasher, and kissed them both good night. Walking to my car, I felt the weight of 34 years finally lift off my shoulders. The house, the land, the old equipment, those could stay in their names. I had quietly walked away with the only parts that mattered. Saturday was coming, and I was ready. Saturday, June 15th, 2024, arrived exactly as planned. The living room smelled faintly of Mom's lemon furniture polish, and the barbecue Dad had fired up earlier to celebrate what he believed would be the proudest day of his life. Tanner wore the new navy suit he'd been bragging about for weeks, and kept checking himself in the hallway mirror. Mom had set out her best crystal pitcher of sweet tea and arranged the family photos so the ones with Tanner were front and center. Everyone was smiling like it was Christmas morning. Dad cleared his throat and stood in the middle of the rug, the same spot he used for every important announcement since I was a child. Rhonda Blair Tanner. Thank you for being here. After a lot of thought, your mother and I have decided it's time to officially pass the company to the next generation. We will hand over all our assets to your younger brother. The words landed exactly as I remembered them from the night everything began. Mom clapped her hands together and beamed at Tanner. Tanner practically glowed. I waited a perfect 3 seconds, then smiled the warmest smile I'd worn in months. Congratulations, Tanner. I reached into my tote, pulled out the Master Factory key on its old brass ring, a thick folder of highlighted contract copies, and the sealed manila envelope I had prepared weeks ago. I placed everything in the center of the coffee table with deliberate calm. Tanner grabbed the envelope first because of course he did. He ripped it open, pulled out the cover letter on pure Summit Holdings letterhead, and started reading. 10 seconds and his face drained of color. 20 seconds and his hands started shaking. He looked up at me like he was seeing a stranger. This has to be a joke. Mom snatched the pages from him and scanned them frantically. Dad leaned over her shoulder and his mouth actually fell open. I stayed seated, hands folded in my lap, and watched the exact moment their world cracked. The front door opened without a knock. Mr. Ernest walked in, carrying a slim leather briefcase, nodded once at me, and addressed the room in the same courtroom voice he had used for 40 years. Good evening. My name is Ernest Walsh. I'm here at Blair's request to confirm that every transfer executed under the 2014 Durable Power of Attorney is legal, recorded, and irreversible. The Walmart exclusive, the filtration technology, the customer lists, the pending patents, all revenue-generating assets now reside solely with Pure Summit Holdings, an Arkansas limited liability company owned 100% by Blair Caldwell. Carson Springs retains the real estate, the outdated equipment, and approximately $11 million in bank debt secured by those assets. He opened the briefcase, laid certified copies on the table, and stepped back. Silence lasted maybe 5 seconds before Mom dropped to her knees on the rug. Blair, baby, whatever this is, we can fix it. Just put everything back the way it was. Dad's voice cracked. You can't do this to your own family. Tanner started screaming that I had stolen his future, his inheritance, his life. He lunged toward the papers like he could rip them up and make it all disappear. Mr. Ernest simply placed one hand on his shoulder and said quietly that destruction of recorded documents would be a felony. I stood up slowly, smoothed my dress, and looked at each of them in turn. You decided long ago what I was worth. Today, I simply agreed with your valuation. Mom was sobbing into the carpet now. Dad kept repeating my name like it could make me stop. Tanner collapsed onto the couch, clutching his head. None of it moved me. I picked up my tote, walked to the front door, and paused only long enough to take the house key off my ring and set it gently on the entry table. I never raised my voice. I never looked back. Outside, Dawson was waiting in his truck. I climbed in, closed the door, and finally let out the breath I'd been holding for 20 years. As we pulled away, I saw Mom run out onto the porch, still calling my name, but the sound faded long before we reached the end of the street. That was the last time I ever stepped foot in the house I grew up in. 1 year later, everything had settled into its final shape. Carson Springs shut down for good in February. The old plant sat empty on the edge of Bentonville with faded signs and weeds pushing through the parking lot cracks. The bank foreclosed on the house in April after missed mortgage payments piled up faster than anyone expected once the revenue stream disappeared. Mom and Dad moved into a one-bedroom apartment above a strip mall on Walnut Street, the kind of place with thin walls and coin laundry in the basement. They sold the country club membership, the boats, Mom's jewelry, anything that could bring in cash to keep the lights on. Tanner lasted 6 months on unemployment before the checks ran out. He applied everywhere with his fancy photography degree and stories about being the future CEO of a multi-million-dollar brand. Nobody called back. Eventually, he swallowed his pride and took a warehouse job at the very Walmart distribution center in Bentonville that used to beg us for shelf space. Now he spends 8 hours a day boxing cases of water under fluorescent lights, earning $19 an hour. He still wears the same defeated look every time our paths cross at the gas station. Pure Summit Holdings, on the other hand, never stopped growing. We opened a second facility in Springdale 6 months after the split, then a third in Rogers, and just broke ground on a fourth outside Fayetteville. Revenue more than doubled in the first 12 months because Walmart expanded our exclusive to every region in the country, and Costco came knocking with their own national deal. The new filtration system I perfected years ago is now the industry benchmark, and every bottle carries the Pure Summit label instead of Carson Springs. Employees who stayed with me got raises and real equity. The ones who left with my parents still send me messages asking if we're hiring. Dawson and I bought a quiet house on 10 acres outside Centerton with a wraparound porch and a view of the hills. We got married in October under the oaks in the backyard, small ceremony, just friends who had watched the whole story unfold. I wake up every morning to birds instead of filling machines and go to sleep, knowing every decision is mine alone. My phone stays silent where I left it. No missed calls, no dramatic texts, no guilt trips. I changed my number the week after I walked out and never looked back. People sometimes ask if I feel bad. The answer is simple. I feel free. I didn't burn the house down. I didn't steal anything. I simply took the value I created with my own hands, my own nights, my own sacrificed youth, and walked away with it. They kept the shell. I kept the soul. The lesson here is straightforward. When someone spends decades telling you through words and actions that you are only the worker and never the golden child, is the heir, believe them the first time. Save your energy, document everything, and when the moment comes, leave with exactly what belongs to you. No shouting, no revenge, just quiet, legal, unstoppable forward motion. To everyone who stayed until the very last word, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your time means the world to me. If this story made you think about your own worth, about the hours you've poured into something that might never carry your name, drop a comment below and tell me what you would do in my shoes. Would you have waited as long as I did? Would you have walked away sooner? I read every single one. And remember, you don't owe anyone the future you built while they were busy planning to give it away. I didn't burn the house. I just took what I built and left. Thank you for listening.